So on behalf of NAMI Alabama, the Alabama Council for Behavioral Health, the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, Wings Across Alabama, thank you again for joining us for this Mental Health Summit. I'm Wanda Laird, NAMIWalks Alabama Walk Manager, and this is Kelly Emerson, our new Executive Director, and we're very pleased to have her. And Kelly is going to share with us the theme for the day as well as our goal. Kelly?
Good morning. This year's theme for the Mental Health Summit is "The Time Is Now." And the goal is to have a day to discover what community mental health should look like. And we need to remember the slogan that's on the back of your folders. How we use time profoundly impacts our state's mental health system and is one of the most valuable gifts we can give to loved ones and friends who are developing, living with, or recovering from mental health conditions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. And this summit would not be possible without the assistance of many individuals whom you will be meeting throughout the day. But we would like to begin with thanking the Alabama Department of Mental Health for their support. And certainly we would like to ask Commissioner Lynn Bashir if you would please stand. And we would like to also recognize some of the Board of Trustees, if you would just remain standing with them, Lynn. First, we have the Honorable Mac McCutcheon. He is going to be the speaker a little bit later today, but he is also serving certainly as a Speaker of the House. We are delighted to have Wade Perry Jr. with us, Curtis James, and William Cobb. We thank you for your service to the Department of Mental Health. And if you would remain standing, I'm going to go ahead and ask all of the employees who are present, who work with the Department of Mental Health, to please stand. Wonderful. Now we're going to ask everyone to stand and join them, and Curtis James is going to come and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Let's pledge our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Curtis. You may be seated. We are so pleased to have several county commissioners with us. I'll begin with the Montgomery County officials. Commissioner Isaiah Sankey, Commissioner Doug Singleton, and Donnie Mims, Administrator. Thank you for joining us. We also have the Commissioner of Cherokee County, Commissioner Marcy Forrester. Commissioner Ricky Hartro from DeKalb County. Peggy Martin, Russell County. Commissioner Peggy Martin. And then we have Commissioner Carolyn Parker from Etowah County. Let's give them a round of applause because we appreciate their support. And certainly we owe a great deal of gratitude to our sponsors. We're going to begin with the bronze sponsors. So Kelly, if you will introduce them.
So our bronze sponsors, first is Walsh and Bingham, and we have from Walsh and Bingham, Joe and Tammy McCorkle. Stand up. Thank you. Also a bronze sponsor is Baptist Health, and representing Baptist Health, we have Sandy Zapata and Laura Strother. Thank you. And our last bronze sponsor is Rumberger, Kirk, and Caldwell, and representing them is Jimmy Walsh. Thank you, Jimmy. Next, we have our gold sponsors, Alkermes Inc. And from Alkermes, we have Gail Cordial, who is the Associate Director of Policy and Government Relations, and Leah Ockmoney, who is the Territory Business Manager. Thank you, ladies. Another gold sponsor is Alta Point Health. And from Alta Point, we have Turk Schlesinger, who's the CEO, Julie Belcase, who is the Chief of Staff, and Steve Dolan, the Chief Information Officer. And our last gold sponsor is Janssen. And from Janssen, we have Scott Willett, who is the Director of Healthcare Policy and Advocacy for Johnson & Johnson Healthcare Systems, Amy Wilburn, and Dana King. And please feel free to visit their booths anytime today.
Great. And we are delighted to also have our platinum sponsors, AB Center for Psychiatric Medicine. We have Beth Kane, who's the administrator. She is joined by Kim Ayers, Melissa Bearden, and Lisa Mattox. Please give all of our sponsors a big round of applause. Thank you so much. And now for just a couple of housekeeping points. We would ask that if you wish to receive continuing education credits today, please visit our registration desk immediately following the summit this afternoon. And then certainly we ask that you place your phones on silence to give our speakers your full attention. And now we would like to introduce Joan Elder, the president of NAMI Alabama, who will introduce the committee members for the summit. Please welcome Joan.
Good morning. I hope everybody is ready for a wonderful day today. I would like to add, we have some of the commissioners from Shelby County. Would they stand if they're here? We're very glad that they're here. This summit would not be possible without a wonderful committee, coalition committee, and I would like, as I introduce you, for you to please stand. From the Alabama Council for Behavioral Health Care, Dr. Jim Dill, who is the Executive Director. Brian Leibel, who's Executive Director of the River Bend Center for Mental Health. And Sheila Hurley, Executive Director of the CED Mental Health Center. From the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, or ADAP, we have James Tucker, who's the Director. And from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, you have Graham Champion, who's our public strategies person. He's probably, if he's not here, he's at the legislature right now. Christy Collins, our peer specialist. Kelly Emerson, our executive director. Dr. Jackie Feldman, who is NAMI's associate medical director. That's for the national organization. Wanda Laird is our manager of NAMIWalks, and Nick Sneed is our advocacy chairperson. Wings Across Alabama is Thompson McCorkle, the executive director. And all of this summit would not be possible without the efforts of our chairperson, Jimmy Walsh. And I want us all give this whole committee a big round of applause. And at this time, we're going to ask Jimmy to come and just say a few words.
Thanks, Joan. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. That's a little better. I want to add Joan's thank you for the members of the committee. I had a lot of 8 o'clock conference calls with homework assigned, and folks were just tremendous putting this on. My name is Jimmy Walsh. I'm a partner at Rumberger, Curtin Caldwell in Birmingham. Many years ago, I served as a recon platoon leader in Vietnam for H. Norman Schwarzkopf. He was my boss. I've been trying cases for over 40 years. And I lived over 40 years with 2 members of my family with bipolar disorder. That's my passion. The pressure of being a recon platoon leader in combat, I was trained for. The pressure to be a trial lawyer, I was trained for. Rolls off my back like water off a duck. The pressure of living with family members in crisis, nobody told me about it. Nobody prepared me for it. And it's like rolling a grenade in the middle of a family. It destroys everybody in its wake. That's why we're here. That's why it's important. Now, if you'll give me a second, I got to cue my computer up here for these slides. Whoa, stop. Whoa. Why won't you listen to me? I'm telling you what to do. Listen to what I'm telling you. Does anybody recognize this situation? How many of you have never talked to your computer? Think it's unanimous. Do you expect to get an answer back? This is exactly the situation that we face dealing with people in crisis. It is an absolutely irrational act trying to be rational with someone who cannot be anything but irrational at the time, yet we do it. And unfortunately, the only time we can see mental illness is when people are in crisis. So I guess that's the solution. We just wait until crisis happens, then we can see it, and then we do something about it. The problem with that theory, though, is that mental illness gets worse if not treated. That's a real surprise. Does anybody think heart disease gets better if you don't treat it? Does anybody think asthma gets better if you don't treat it? Why do we think that we can wait to treat mental health when you're in crisis? But that's the plan. The time is now. That's our theme. Mental illness is like any other disease. It responds to early treatment and consistent treatment. Good, effective treatment reduces the chance of crisis. And at the very least, it lengthens the time between crises so that people can live a fairly normal life. We tend to separate substance abuse. You know what substance abuse is. That's people who want to party and get caught partying. No. How many of you ever had poison ivy? Raise your hands, please. Okay. Did your mother tell you not to scratch? Did you scratch anyway? Well, this is scratching. If they don't have medication, they're going out of their minds trying to figure out what's wrong. And they're trying to get a solution. If they can't get prescription drugs, they go to the street. And then we wonder why they do it. They're scratching the itch. It is absolutely no different. We have to remember that. So legally and morally, we have to treat this disease early and often. Much of the disease is diagnosed because of a first crisis. Terrible way to find out. I found out that way, and I can assure you it's no fun. When it happens, most often the patient has no insight, no judgment, and that's how we came to call people in crisis crazy, because that's the only word we could come up with. I'm often told by prosecutors and police officers, well, we had to arrest him, he was acting crazy. And then I ask, did it ever occur to you that he wasn't acting? It's the truth. It's bizarre behavior. That's how the name came. They believe that they're fine, and you're the one that's crazy. They're very resistant to treatment, and it's very, very difficult to get them to treatment. The Constitution, that wonderful document we have, sometimes gets in the way of what we want to do. And you cannot hold somebody for treatment against their will without invoking a court process with due process for the individual. We have a good system, but it just has to work. So because both the Constitution and our state statutes impose upon the state an obligation to take care of persons in need of treatment for mental illness, the state then has both a moral and a social interest in preventing crisis. If you don't prevent crisis, you go into an irrational thought process and total failure of judgment that can lead to illegal actions, can lead to danger for that person or to someone else, and lead to expensive incarceration or worse, injury or death. The state has the only power to compel treatment. Could I get my first slide, please? This first slide talks about the requirements for commitment. In order to get somebody into the hospital and keep them there, they have to be mentally ill. They'll continue to suffer or get worse if not treated for their illness. They're unable to make rational and informed decisions as to whether they need treatment. Oh, they can make decisions. They don't need it and they don't want it. And they must pose a risk of harm to self or others. In order to determine whether they're a danger to self, you talk about a possibility of a self-inflicted injury or an injury to someone else. You talk about serious self-neglect, not just the fact that they're not taking care of themselves, but that they can't take care of themselves. Just being dirty or unkept does not qualify. The definition of substantial harm doesn't require an overt act, but it does require a real and present threat of substantial harm, and that's the standard for commitment. I tell people all the time, there's an old phrase that everybody's familiar with. It depends on what the definition of is, and I tell them when you're drafting a commitment petition, you stretch that is as far as it'll go across the page. Don't lie, but stretch it until they go to the hospital, because otherwise they may not. You know, we try to prevent forest fires and wars because they tend to get out of control. We tend to prevent heart attacks and asthma attacks because they get out of control. We avoid preventing mental illness because we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to deal about it, and we've got that big bugaboo, stigma. Because we can't see it until it roars. And then when it's roaring, then we decide, well, we better do something, long after we should have been doing something. And it also requires a system that costs money. But prevention and stabilization are effective, and they're much cheaper. Treating crisis takes a lot of effort, a lot of effort. Ask some of the folks here that deal with mental illness every day about crisis. It's a whole lot of effort. It's expensive, it's more difficult, and it steals money from prevention. While we're putting out fires, we can't prevent the fires. You have to be flexible enough with enough funding to make sure that you can do both. Because if we can't chew chewing gum and walk at the same time, we will never effectively deal with mental illness on a community faction. Treating with prevention is much more effective. It can be done efficiently, cheaper, effectively, and that's what we're about here today. One other point I wanted to talk about is the difference in our patient load. Why is that not? Now it is talking to me. Can you make that go forward to slide 4, please? Okay. Wyatt versus Stickney is back where this began, where we really began to treat. We had 7,000 beds in Alabama back then. 7,000 beds. Lots of them just warehouse beds. There were 5,000 people at Bryce. Next slide. I'm not sure why it's not working. This is what we have today. Now that looks good. That looks great. And if we're talking about proper treatment and preventing crisis, that works. But if we're not, it doesn't work. And right now in Jefferson County, if you want to get someone who is in imminent danger of harm to themselves or other into a bed, you may wait 4, 6, 8 weeks for a bed. When my son was in crisis and somebody had told me we were going to have to wait for a month, somebody was going to get hurt, and it was probably going to be me. You cannot imagine what it's like being in a house with somebody who's in crisis. And they have no idea that it's going on. You're going to hear some of that today. 479 beds, and I think we've got a few more now because of some work we've done at Taylor Hardin, is a good start. And that'll work if we're working well in the community. And the Department of Mental Health, led by the commissioner, I frankly don't know how they do what they do with what they do, except there are a lot of extraordinary people there. And they wring every last dollar out of the turnip that they can use because it's really important. But if you'll go to the next slide, this letter we sent in 2017 to the governor and a lot of officials saying we need to add $89.9 million to our $98.9 million to our budget to effectively treat mental health issues. We know we're not going to get that much money at the start, but if you don't aim high, you're going to end up low. Next slide. This is the letter that we sent this year, and guess what? It's the same letter. Shocking. You know, and we say, well, we've given you level funding. How many of you have not had a raise for 10 years? You have to start cutting down, don't you? Well, that's what the department's had. They haven't had a raise. All right, let's talk about doing something about this, and let's talk about the time is now. Next slide, please. On down to the schedule. I think we've got an interesting schedule here. Next letter, please. Next slide. There you go. There you go, right there. Our first class is going to be about what happens in crisis. You're going to see someone talk about crisis. You're going to hear a sheriff talk about how they have to treat, as the largest mental health care provider in the state, and deal with people in crisis. We're going to hear about the prison system and how that is dealt with. And then we're going to get real, and we're going to talk about a death that occurred 25 weeks ago to someone who is in crisis. And then you're going to see what we can do, what we did so well last year and we're so excited about, the increase in CIT training. And we're going to have a demonstration between someone in crisis and a deputy sheriff who deals with this every day. And I think you're going to learn a lot about that. We're going to talk about, in the second class, we're going to talk about how we get people into a good place. We're going to talk about commitment through the probate court and getting people into the hospital as soon as we can. We're going to talk about diversion courts, mental health court and drug court, getting these people out of jail, into treatment, so that they can get to a better place and stop this cycle of ending up in jail. Then we're going to talk about what happens when you get to the hospital, what emergency treatment's like, what emergency treatment can be, as opposed to showing up waiting for 7 hours while you're in crisis trying to get in to see somebody. We're going to talk about how our community mental health system can work, both in the city and in rural areas. At lunch, you're going to hear from the Speaker of the House, Mac McClutchin, and from the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Dale Marsh. And then the commissioner is going to give her a few of your ideas about how this is going to be done. After lunch, Judge Leifman from Miami-Dade County is going to talk about how they did it. If we get out of our stovepipes and cities and communities and counties and the state cooperate, instead of pointing at each other and saying, well, it's your fault, we don't have any money, we can't do anything. If we work together, he can tell you how we can do this and how much we can accomplish. Then I think the best hour is going to be about peer support and respect, what people who are suffering really need, how they can work together. It's a twofer. We give the person that is involved the benefit of feeling good about giving something back and doing something that's well-meaning, and we have somebody who's walked in the shoes who that person will believe. You and I can talk to that person till the sun goes down and they won't believe us. And the person that says, I've been there, the hospital works, you can do this, they'll listen. It's all about self-worth and respect. Then we're going to talk about something called housing. I firmly believe that you can give all the meds in the world. If you don't have a roof and stability, we can't do anything. You've got to have those things in order to accomplish it. And then Dr. Fillman and I are going to finish up the last part of that with the kind of legal, medical aspect of this business and what we can do together. We have to get out of our stovepipes. We have to talk to each other. The commissioners in the counties and the cities have to talk with the legislators. The legislators have to look at the cities and see what's going on. This is a crisis. Look in this room. 1 out of 5 of you right now is dealing with mental illness. That's the statistic. It measures across. One of my best friends was a CEO in Birmingham. He's now dead from bipolar disorder. And he had a heart attack, but he had a heart attack because he wasn't taking his meds. It's important. We have to cooperate or we'll fail. Failure is jail or prison or being shot. That's our failure, and it occurs all too often. We have to do this or it's morally reprehensible. It's constitutionally prohibited, and litigation will follow if we don't solve it. There's no reason for litigation. The time is now.